Sonic was never an unexpected success that later got additional games. Sonic was built from the ground up to be a hit, and I'm not talking about his character here. No, I'm talking about the release method of his first games. Although the games didn't release day and day with each other, the 16-bit and 8-bit games, both called Sonic the Hedgehog, were clearly developed at the same time, and the 8-bit version was made for one purpose only: marketing. Sega wanted as many products with Sonic's face on them as possible, but is the game worth playing on its own merits? Once again, Green Hill is the first zone in the bunch, and it's really boring to talk about. It's just a standard first level and doesn't hit any of the highs that the 16-bit version did. The most interesting thing that I can bring up in relation to this zone is how I spent most of Act 1 off screen. It was fun, but not that interesting. Instead, I'll be using Green Hill section to talk about the mechanics of this game, which I definitely did for the 16-bit version. I did not forget to do that. The long and short of it is that as Sonic runs, it gains momentum, and the environment interacts with said momentum as you expect it to. Rings serve as both a health system and a main collectible, which works well to not deter you from harder sections. However, unlike the previous game, getting hit does not spill your rings out onto the floor for you to collect. I assume it's because we're on lower power hardware now. I can see it becoming a real problem later on, but for now it's not a big deal. What is a big deal is the boss here. Like the rest of the zone, it's just so boring. Robotnik just flies around. Oh wait, sorry, that's not right. I should say that he just flies around out of your reach before charging out the longest tag ever. This boss is better than the 16-bit Labyrinth boss, but only because I can call this one a boss. Up next we have Bridge Zone, the first zone original to this game. And I think that this zone serves as the perfect example for what a bad zone looks like in this game compared to what it looked like in the 16-bit version. In that game, the duds actively made me mad. Here they're mildly annoying, but not what I'd call egregiously bad. I suppose that's better, but it definitely makes the script writing process harder. This zone's main problem is just the lack of vision. For context, I'm playing the Master System version of the game as opposed to the Game Gear version, but I'm still experiencing screen crunch. I have no idea why the camera moves up so much whenever Sonic jumps. It's not like there's anything up there. I'd much prefer that the camera keeps its focus on the platforms that I actually need to land on. And then there's Act 2. This, for whatever ungodly reason, is an auto-scroller in a Sonic game. Why? Now, I know that the Genesis far exceeds the power of the Master System, but I thought that the point of Sonic was that he could run fast. You're really not even gonna try to reflect that? No? You're just gonna use a level type that's completely god-awful in every game that it appears in and give it to a guy named Sonic? Cool. Yeah, awesome. That's actually exactly what I wanted. Yep, The boss of the zone maintains the boring bad status by just kinda being there. He pops out from the water on the other side and shoots the easiest to dodge projectile that I've ever seen. Boring, bad, next. Jungle Zone is interesting. I actually think that Act 1 can serve as the foundation for a decent level. Running on logs is a neat idea, and I really enjoy the speed that the sloped vines can give you. But it's got some things holding it back. The vines are almost never placed in a way that you can properly gain speed from, and the logs seem to cap your speed more than anything. Additionally, this is where the ring system raises its ugly head. Since you lose all your rings when you get hit immediately, getting more than one ring is basically meaningless. Getting more rings doesn't give you a better chance at reclaiming more rings. Either way, you're going to lose 100% of them. I understand that these lower fidelity systems won't handle much of rings popping out of Sonic well. Hell, the game is already pretty laggy as is. But was this really the best solution? Why not just have the player lose 10 rings whenever they get hit? That would make it so they don't lose everything for one little mistake. All this isn't even the worst of the zone, because Act 2 is awful. It's a purely vertical level, so it's already on thin ice as is, but this level decides to go a step beyond and move the death plane up every time you jump on a platform. What's that? You missed some rings on a lower platform? Tough shit, there's a death plane there now. Let's not forget the fuck you bumper at the midpoint that can also send you to your doom, and also the logs that function differently than the logs in Act 1 and will drop as soon as you jump on them, giving you no time to adjust. This entire level is complete agony, and the boss isn't any better. The entire thing takes place on a slope, so you're constantly having to readjust yourself to avoid the bomb. And even when you land the final hit, you could still die. What a disgrace of a level. Of all the levels to reuse, I'm not sure why they love this zone so much, to the point that it's in 16% of the zones in both games, and 33% of the reuse zones from this game. But regardless, this zone still sucks. You move even slower underwater in this game, to the point that you can't even run, capping your speed at your walk animation. And then there's the enemies. Well, one enemy. In the 16-bit version, Orbunauts would space out their projectiles far enough so that you can jump in between them. Here, they just get set out all at once. So you have to wait for Orbunaut to send out its projectiles all at once, then go and find Airboa because he takes forever to attack. Then you have to slowly walk back and roll into him. Oh, and you can't jump over him because the ceilings are so damn narrow and also filled with spikes whenever he appears. The boss here is probably the best so far, but that doesn't mean it's good. The worst part is that it takes place entirely underwater. You can't drown though, so it's entirely to fuck with your jumps. So you'll just die if you hit him when he's on the bottom. The doctor is still easy to dodge, just don't know him too much, because the missiles just go underneath you. To this game's credit, this wasn't as bad as I thought it'd be. It's not good, but not the worst it could be. The problem from the 16-bit version with constantly moving inch by inch to avoid the trap hasn't been corrected here. But I didn't even bother with it and just use iframes to get through everything. It also helps that there are less traps and all, but they're placed in annoying spots. Combined with the fact that this game is just slower in general, and this zone is just annoying all around. I noticed here that the camera is really weird. Sonic is always just slightly off-center from the camera, making it hard to tell where you're going sometimes. This level also has these one-side doors that lock up on the non-lit sides. They're fine here, but they're much more annoying later on. Speaking of later on, it's time for Act 3. That's right, Act 3. Not the boss. There is no boss. Just a maze. I don't like mazes. And I don't like this. But once we get through it, Sonic ascends into the last zone. Bright lights alert. I repeat, bright lights alert. This zone has bright lights rapidly flashing. If you are sensitive to that kind of thing, either avert your eyes until I talk about Act 2, or skip to this timestamp. That's right, this zone is firing on all cylinders, not only attacking Sonic, but the player's eyes as well. These electrical currents both box you in for a while and flash lights in your face, which really gets you after a while. We also have these cannons that give you very little space to wait out your shots, and let's not forget that these are often placed right before the currents, making you wait even longer before you can jump. Speaking of waiting before you can jump, this zone marks the return of Orbunauts. This game has single-handedly made me Orbunaut's biggest hater. At first, I thought that I had to wait for an eternity for it to slowly fly into a position that would allow me to jump over it. But apparently not, because you can, for some reason, jump into him, and that will kill him. Might I ask, why? Since like Labyrinth Zone Orbunauts that fire off their spikes, this guy keeps his spikes. So, logic would dictate that jumping into him would make me take damage, which is only sometimes true. I don't know how or why they programmed it this way, but I'm just glad that there are only like 3 Orbunauts in the entire game, because they're a constant sour spot for it. One thing I do like about this zone is that Act 1 and 2 neatly transition into each other, with the end of Act 1 having Sonic land on a blimp, and Act 2 taking place on said blimp. The actual Act 2 itself? Well, it's a gauntlet. The beginning is basically a bullet hell with all the cannons firing at you. Then you have to pull back at the very last moment to avoid running into a bomb so that you have enough space away from the spike wall chasing you to position yourself between the pixels in order to not get hit by the explosion. And then you have to weave through bullets fired off by these cannons that come at you fast. Oh, and you don't have any rings. Oh! And in order to get the Chaos Emerald here, you have to perform a leap of faith off of the stage and ride these yellow flying platforms to the end of the stage with the cannons. Oh yeah, the Chaos Emeralds. Yeah, I didn't mention them before, but in this game, the Chaos Emeralds are found through the second act of every zone. I wouldn't say there's much incentive to go for them though, even from a narrative perspective. Do you want to know how to get all the emeralds? The cloud on the road map disappears. That's it. I don't know, I felt like I was getting more out of the emeralds in the 16-bit version, where I got to restore nature as the results of getting them all. Regardless, I got all of them without having to do a second playthrough, as most of them can be found just through exploring. But I fully admit that I only got some of these because this is not my first time playing the game. Like in Scrap Brain, you need to know which pit to fall down in order to find a way to do a teleport that leads to the emerald, and that goes dull for one in Skybase. Technically, this makes it easier for you to beat the level, but again, you need to perform a leap of faith, and then you still have a boss fight to do. I actually think that the boss is better than the 16-bit version's final boss. Not what I call a good boss, but it's a definite improvement. First off, Robotnik stays in one spot and doesn't move, so you'll never not be able to hit him because you lost a 50-50. He really only has 2 attacks. He'll fire off an energy spear every so often, and it can keep you on your toes, but I never found it to be any issue. His main attack is his pillar of electricity, now with 100% less flashing. Near the end of the fight, the patterns get more erratic and unpredictable. This makes for a tense fight and some bullshit. So many times did I die when I swear I was outside the pillar's range. Something I appreciate about this fight is that it feels way more climactic than the 16-bit version. It's not much, but the cutscene of Sonic falling robotic to a teleporter goes a long way in making this feel like a finale. Well, now that we're at the end, it's time to answer the question that I posed at the start. Is the 8-bit version of Sonic 1 worth playing on its own merits? No, it isn't. Speaking as someone who already doesn't like the 16-bit version, this game makes me appreciate everything that game did right so much more. There's not a single zone in this game that I think back fondly on. Not a single part of this game that I consider fun. And I know that sounds like I hate the game, but I really don't. It's just bad enough to just be a bad game. It's not anything egregious. It doesn't commit any cardinal sin of game design. It's just bad. If you really want to experience the best that this game has to offer, just listen to the soundtrack. See tier.